tonight we're going to be learning more about this. So we have just 5 minutes for introduction. As you can see, the timetable. Mariko, do you want to show the timetable?
Yes. Sorry.
And after this brief introduction, then Mariko who is our director of Not for Sale, will be giving a 15-minute introduction about this ethical report card. And then Ms. Kirie Suzuki will be giving her presentation after that. And then Mariko will give her presentation. We have a little time for a group photo, Q&A, announcements, closing remarks. And then from 9 o'clock, if you have time and want to stick around, we have time just to chat, to get to know you better. If you would like to say what you're doing or how you're involved in these kind of ethical shopping things, it'd be just a relaxed cafe time at the very end from 9 to 9:20 or so. And the requests that we have of you would be, you probably got this in the email, no recording or photo shooting, please, but we are recording the event. And the lecture part will be available on our YouTube channel. So we ask you to mute your microphones while the lecturer is speaking, but we would like, if possible, for you to have your videos on so we can see who's here. But we're going to try only to record the speaker's face. But there might be some accidents. So if you're really cautious about that, you can switch it off, of course. If some of you just got up in the morning, like maybe Stan might not be ready to show his face, whatever. Okay, so if you have any questions, you could put them into the chat, or when we get to our Q&A time, you can ask them directly in English, or Japanese is probably okay too. We can try to work with that. And I'll try to translate if there's needing to be translation. Some of you already gave us some questions to think about, but maybe those will be answered throughout this presentation. So if you still have further questions, you can add them into the chat or the question and answer time. So I think I covered everything there. Okay, so just to introduce us as Not for Sale Japan, we are raising awareness of modern day slavery, human trafficking issues, both labor trafficking and sex trafficking. And we belong to, to two networks, the one that we'll be focusing on tonight, SSRC, and another one, Genotip, Japan National Aware
Japan Network
Network
Against Trafficking in Persons.
Against Trafficking in Persons. Thank you. And our volunteer staff, you can see some of our pictures here. So we've been doing this for about 13, 14 years. And people who have NFSJ after their name are the staff. Okay, next slide. I guess, so to introduce today's guest speaker, who will be speaking after Mariko speaks, actually, but she's the Chief Secretariat of Japan Wildlife Conservation Society. And you can see her profile here on the slide. Also, I think you got it in the beginning when you looked at our flyer for this cafe. So she's been working on these issues related to Japanese consumption and endangered species around the world. So I guess with that quick introduction of this whole cafe, let's turn it over to Mariko to give us the first little presentation.
Okay, thank you, Bunny. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about the ethical report card of companies now. My name is Mariko Yamaoka, and I am the director of the Not for Sale Japan and the co-director of the SSRC, which I'm going to talk about. This is the first time that we explain the ethical report card in English. So thanks very much for joining us tonight. And the ethical report card is the project being carried out by the SSRC, Citizens Network to Build a Sustainable Society Through Responsible Consumption. Very long name. So SSRC was founded to promote the ethical consumption in 2016, when SDGs started, by various NGOs and NPOs that work in the fields of environment, consumers' rights, etc., etc. So we are the network of very different, many different organizations. And it is now comprised of 38 organizations from 18 prefectures throughout Japan. Like I just said, we aim to promote ethical consumption. And in order to have more ethical products, we thought consumers should demand more such products so that the retailers and manufacturers will carry and produce more ethical goods. But in reality, consumers cannot easily find information on what the ethical products are and where they can buy such products. So we realized that first we need to spread more information on ethical products. Thus, our two projects started. One is Guricho, or Green and Ethical Choices. It's a listing of ethical products on a website. We give information about each product's names and why we think they are ethical. Another project is the ethical report card of companies, which we are going to talk about today. Excuse me. So, these are the list of the fields of categories that we cover in our ethical report card project. There are 7 main categories: sustainability management structure, consumer protection and support, human rights and labor practices, social responsibility and contribution, peace and non-violence, and animal welfare. These are the 6 categories, and the 7th is the environment. And the environment category is divided into 6 subcategories. They are environmental governance, climate change, waste reduction, biodiversity, chemicals, and water. So we create our own checklist to be filled in in order to calculate the grades for each company. The checklist file is comprised of 12 Excel spreadsheets. This is how it looks like, and this is the very beginning of the spreadsheet of human rights and labor practices category. We have columns of questions, answer choices, and where we put check marks right here, check marks, and explain explain why we selected this answer. And there are spaces where the company put their own check marks and explain why they selected this answer. The columns of points allotted and points acquired will be hidden when the Excel files are sent to the companies. So how we grade the companies. So this is the process chart of the project. First, SSRC members divided into 12 groups investigate using publicly available sources like the company's website, integrated corporate reports, past news articles, or reports issued by other NGOs or research organizations. And this is very important. We don't just send the companies the blank sheet of checklist and ask them to fill in. We do preliminary research and then send it to the company. The company will review the checklist results, enter the suggestion of their check, and provide new information and send it back to SSRC. And we review the company's proposals and decide whether to accept it or not and send it again to the company. So after approximately 2 rounds of such communications, we finalize the result and come up with the final grades. We think having a conversation online is our unique way of communicating with corporations. Usually in March, we have the result showing meeting where each of the 12 teams explain the results and trends of the report card and talk about the issue and topics of each category. In the past few years, we have been having dialogue with the companies after the result showing to receive feedback of the project, to give advice from the standpoint of civil society, and to discuss the issues that are unique to the industry. So these are the industries that we covered in the past. Right now, we are doing the investigation of toiletry industry, the large-scale manufacturers of shampoos, soaps, toothpaste, and other daily goods. So this is for the this year, 2024. So those are the industries, and we covered apparels 2 times, and food processings twice. So this is how the final result came to look like. This is the latest result, the apparel companies. You may see that the grades are different among companies and also among the categories. We don't calculate the average or total score for each company. The reason is that if we do that, it would automatically rank the companies. We don't want to do that because if we rank the companies according to the total score, it would prevent the viewers to see the results of each categories. We want the viewers of the ethical report card to judge the company according to their own interest. So this is the result of 6 subcategories of the environment. So finally, I hope that the consumers use the ethical report card and change their way of shopping. I hope that everyone understands that they have the power of consumers and can leverage the power of buying as a tool to change the world. And so this is how we see the project promote ethical society through companies' contribution. We have learned through the dialogue with companies we researched that they recognize their own benefit from being target companies. We hope to continue promoting ethical society through this ethical report card project. So we have not given information in English so often. These are the very few information that we have on the ethical report card of companies. Our website has an English page, but unfortunately the content is almost 5 years old. The blog article that Eco Networks has made was from 2024 and covering the result showing meeting of apparel industry. So this is the brief introduction of ethical report card of companies. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me to the Not for Sale Japan Cafe. I'm a Kirie Suzuki and the Secretary General of Japan Wildlife Conservation Society, JWCS. In the ethical report card of companies, I'm in charge of the biodiversity section. Let me give you a brief introduction to JWCS. In the 1980s to 90s, Japan's economy grew, and within it came a lot of wildlife purchased from around the world. For example, the reason there is so much ivory in Japan today is because Japan imported large amount of them before the international trade in ivory was banned. Japanese consumers were responsible for the decline of the elephants. That's why we established JWCS. Around the world, ivory is banned not only internationally but also domestically. This is caused the price of ivory to fall, but you can still buy ivory in Japan. So our mission continues. Next, I will introduce the activities of JWCS. JWCS studied as a policy study group. We work to mainstream wildlife conservation by raising awareness, especially online. Please check our social media. You can research for JWCS. We are working to protect the endangered species that Japan uses commercially. JWCS is a small organization with only part-time staff, including myself. And therefore, we work with the operation with the international NGO networks. The ethical report card of companies is also an activity of the Citizen Network, SSRC. This year, we lobbied for the amendment of the Endangered Species Conservation Act. We are also working in the issue of damage of agriculture caused by elephants in the Republic of Congo in Africa. This is because there are boys from Japan that say that elephants should be killed for the conflict reasons, and the ivory should be used. So we have held beekeeping classes at the alternative livelihood. That's all our introduction. Next. So let's move on to today's main topic, biodiversity and shopping. I'm sure you are all aware that human life is supported by blessing from nature. It is essential that the various living things on the earth interact with each other. We survive because the biodiversity is maintained. Scientists want that biodiversity essential to human survival is declining. Some of you may remember coverage of the report, Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Service from May 2019 when it was released. So, IPBES, that this is often described as the ICPP for biodiversity. It provides policymakers with objective scientific assessments. The report also revealed the cause of biodiversity decline and the extent of its impact. The biggest factor is reducing biodiversity was land conversion, such as deforesting to make way for farmland. And the second is the direct use of biological resources. As Yamaoka-san mentioned earlier, the survey covered 7 areas. The environmental section is further divided into 6 sections. There are examples of what we check. In biodiversity, we look at land use, raw material sourcing, and whether or not the company is committed to the TNFD, the Task Force on Nature-related Financial Disclosures. Sorry. There are surveys of the corporate activities and do not increase support for the nature conservation organizations. That is evaluated under the area of social responsibility and contribution. Cause of the biodiversity loss decline and essential report card of the companies are linked. You can see it. So, at the conference of the parties to the Convention of the Biodiversity, Biological Diversity, CBD, goals for 2030 were adopted in 2022. These increase nature positive or turning nature into the increase. The Japanese government has also announced a policy to shift to the nature positive economy. This means that for the companies, nature conservation is no longer a social contribution, but a business strategy. And the government has recognized this. TNFD that analyzes, that discloses biodiversity-related risks and opportunities in corporate activities. It is now its important time for investors to use this information to decide whether it's the worth investing in, and for consumers to choose companies that are committed to nature positive practices. So in fiscal year 2023, SSRC looked at the apparel industry. So here is some example of how the apparel industry impacts biodiversity. In Pakistan, where cotton is produced, dams for agricultural water and pesticides are destroying river ecosystems, including Indus River dolphins, the endangered species. The Tibetan Plateau, where wool is produced, conflicts are occurring between the large numbers of sheep and wildlife. These are the result of our rating or the top 10 Japanese apparel companies. Overall, the score is peace, non-violence, and animal welfare are low. Next, let's take a closer look at the result of the environment areas. The bottom part of the radar chart shows the score of the biodiversity section. Even First Reading and Ryohin Kikaku, which are working on the environmental issues, but have low scores for biodiversity. The average average percentage of the 10 companies that satisfied the check items in the biodiversity section was 15%. An increasing number of companies are setting guidelines procurement of the raw materials. However, this attention was paid to land for its own use and own buildings. such as constructing of factories, warehouses, and stores. Now let's change the topic and talk about why it is important to approach companies in Japan using sharks as an example. Most shark species in the international shark fin trade have adopted regulations at CITES. However, Japan was not joined the CITES regulations for the conservation of sharks. The Japanese government insists that sharks and whales should not be regulated under CITES. The fishers are also opposed to the regulations. Their insistence has not changed at all. But other countries recognize CITES Appendix 2 as a tool for the sustainable fishing. Appendix 2 allows trade if fishing is legal and sustainable. Technical terms are legal acquisition findings and non-determined findings. So, for Japanese companies that trade products containing sharks internationally, it would be easier to do business under the same CITES rules as other countries. Moreover, they can operate a business that has proven legally sustainability and traceability. Communication is needed not only between the government and the fishermen, but also with multiple stakeholders, such as the business sector, consumers, and the next generations. The Japanese government listens to the business sector more than citizens. So I hope for the breakthrough from the ethical companies. For example, there are already fisheries companies that have set a goal of preventing sharks by catch, and some retailers that have stopped handling ivory. I believe that the ethical report card companies had the following efforts. Expressing the citizens are watching the ethical behavior of companies. Citizens should advocate for values such as peace, non-violence, and animal welfare that companies are not aware of. And empowering ethical companies that go beyond national policies and change society. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so this is my second presentation, and it's about the human rights and labor practices category. So the title is "Which Companies Value People as Seen in the Ethical Report Card of Companies Project." Okay. So so this is the same slide that I've shown before. And so this is the human rights and labor practices part. And human rights, so that includes human rights training and remedy, gender equality, employment of the handicapped, or labor exploitation, or fair trade, or etc., etc. So this is the section that we deal with. So I am in the team on that section. So what are human rights? Let me ask first. So first of all, well, you might already know it, but let me quote from the United Nations documents here. So human rights are rights inherent to all human beings, regardless of race, sex, nationality, ethnicity, language, religion, or any other status. And human rights include the right to life and liberty, freedom from slavery and torture, freedom of opinion and expression, the right to work and education, and many more. So here you can see the word work. So that's where it is related to this business. I mean the report card, because the work means that they work with the companies, a lot of them. So, what does the human rights have to do with the business practices? Um, People who work in businesses are protected by the international covenant that were agreed almost half a century ago. And in 2011, the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights outlined how business can contribute to protection of human rights. That is, to identify the negative impacts on human rights and then have the adequate policies and procedures to address the negative impacts. So, in short, business should undertake human rights due diligence to identify, prevent, and mitigate human rights abuses. These are a few examples of business and human rights issues. Child labor, forced labor, and modern slavery and human trafficking are typical and serious problems that can happen easily anywhere, whether in the supply chains or in the downstream corporations. And power harassment, sexual harassment, bullying, violence, or any other harassment or discrimination can happen at workplace. Yeah, the discrimination in wages and promotion also. And health hazards and other types of human rights abuses can happen in the local areas, especially factories and farms are operated. So these are the examples of human rights abuses or the negative impacts on human rights, categorized by the type of people who are impacted. So towards the employees of the company and the employees of the suppliers and society itself and the socially vulnerable people, and towards the local residents in the production area that I just mentioned, and towards the victims of conflicts and refugees or IDPs, or towards the consumers. So there are many, many human rights abuses that can be categorized in those 6 or more categories. And the contents of those in the rounded rectangles are the same as the previous slide. But here we can see that those negative impacts on human rights are related to not only the category of human rights and labor practices, but other categories in the ethical report card of companies, like those in red. For example, the harms done for local residents here are related to the categories of biodiversity and water. So these are assessed in those categories. So our human rights and labor practices team mainly cover the human rights abuses towards workers, like these and these. So these are the examples of questions that we ask in our checklist. I hope you will grasp the essence of our research from those questions, like, do you clearly state respect for human rights in your corporate philosophy, management philosophy, etc.? Or do you provide ongoing training for employees on human rights? And there are questions regarding the female managers, ratio of female managers. That means the gender equality, or to prevent labor exploitation, long working hours and low wages. And of course, the suppliers, the supply chain management. So do you make any request to your suppliers, whether in Japan or overseas, to eliminate forced labor, child labor, and human trafficking, and to prevent the unfavorable working conditions, and work against the will of the worker? So those are the type of questions. 7 out of 32 questions that we ask. Oops. Okay. So we oh, excuse me. So go back to that. Okay. The important thing is that we base our research on the publicly available sources. So disclosure of information is very important for the companies to score higher. Even if the company does deal with those things we ask, unless it is openly stated somewhere, we cannot evaluate it. So this is the chart I made for this category of the grades of the companies we have evaluated for the past decades. Every year, the checklist is being modified bit by bit, so you cannot really compare them with equal weight, but at least you can see which company scores higher in the same industry, industry category. The grade 9 is the highest. That means from 90% to 10%. Panasonic and Suntory scored 9 in the past. Those in 8 are the ones with great efforts as well. Yes, the fast retailing is 8. The most notable leap from grade 1 to 7 in 7 years is Aoyama Trading. So it was ranked 1, but ranked, no, I mean the score was 1, the grade was 1, the lowest grade. But last year, Aoyama, the score was very high, as high as 7. So this is the conclusion. Corporate activities should take great care not to harm or exploit anyone. So the ethical report card is a push and a warning to encourage ethical behavior in companies and consumers. So today I had a very short time and could not say everything I wanted. So I would like you to learn more about this project and us, both SSRC and NFSJ, using those websites and social media. Unfortunately, SSRC's information is not always translated into English, but NFSJ is trying to be bilingual as much as possible. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.